So sorry. This is a highlight video for NTS.
Yeah. So for 25 years, NTS Camp, which stands for Never the Same Camp, has been doing what you just saw, gathering students together to have an experience with God. And then out of that, we've seen life transformation happen all these years. It's just been amazing that Joy and I and our church has been able to be a part of this. So if you have no idea what took place about little over a week ago, we gathered with 400 other students and 100 other leaders. We took 36 students, 6 leaders of our own, and 5 staff to go down to this camp, which is for middle school and high school students. And out of that, we saw students come to Christ. We saw students receive a call or an invitation to vocational ministry. In fact, what we saw in our own group is we saw one student called to first-time vocational ministry, and over 20 students recommit their lives to Christ. And so I would just love to celebrate that part of it with you. It's just an incredible opportunity. And so I just want to, we talked about this last week, but I just want to express my appreciation to all of the leaders that went and the staff that helped make this a reality, and we're just grateful for it. So I thought it'd be cool to share that with you and celebrate that with you, because it's a year-long process for us to take all these students and to pray and to plan all that stuff out. So, and also, it's actually not on stage, but we did win the cup this year. So gold team, go gold. So I had the privilege of knowing my grandparents growing up as a kid, and I know not everybody gets that privilege and that experience, and so I was so grateful for that because they were a big part of my life. I have a lot of fond memories. My grandmother, she was hilarious, cracked a lot of jokes, and I remember in church, she would make faces at me and hand me Tic Tacs. So those are some good memories of my grandma. She always had combos too in her purse for whatever reason. So maybe that's where my love of combos came. But my grandfather and I had a special relationship. Besides my parents, he was probably one of the biggest influences in my life. And so I always enjoyed going to visit them. They lived in Central Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere, this little town called Wellsboro. And so I got, beyond even all my brothers and sisters that growing up, I was the one that visited them the most. And I just loved going there because it was quiet, and my grandfather would let me drive the tractor, and I would help him in the gardens, and it was just like innocent, fun time to be together, to work. He would take me, if I was really good, he would take me to Pizza Hut, right? And I was so pumped about Pizza Hut night. And so we had good times together. Now, regardless of what you feel about guns, I grew up with guns, and my grandfather had a lot of them. He served in World War II, and so that was one of the things I looked forward to. Is he taught me first how to use a BB gun. And so every time I came over, one of the first things I wanted to do was shoot the BB gun. And so he taught me how to have this little pump-action BB gun, and we would shoot it down in the basement, and he would teach me how to use it. And then as I got older, I would graduate to the .22 and then the .22 Magnum, and then I was starting to shoot rifles as I got into like 12, 13 years old. And my grandfather, he would tell me the same thing over and over. He would say, Anthony, that's what my family calls me, Anthony, there's 3 things you need to know about gun safety. First is always treat a gun as if it is loaded. Whether you think it is or not, always treat a gun that you are handling as if it is loaded. And then he would tell me, always make sure that you are pointing the gun in a safe direction. Whether you think it's loaded or not, never point your gun at somebody. Never point it in a direction where you know it could potentially hurt somebody. And then third, always keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to shoot. And he would teach me about the safety too, but he said never trust the safety, okay, because safeties can fail, and it's happened. And so he would teach me these 3 things over and over and over and over, and making sure that I'm treating this gun in a safe manner. And he would tell me this every time I came over when we were shooting guns, because my grandfather was not only handing me something very powerful, but he was handing me something even more powerful, which was he was giving me the wisdom to know how to use it. And again, like we all have different opinions in the room, and all have different life experiences, but I think that's something that we can agree on, is that a gun, regardless of who's holding it, is still a very, very dangerous tool. And so we need the wisdom to know how to use it if we choose to do that. And see, for my grandfather, he was trying to show me how to be constructive and not destructive. And God, by his grace, has done the same with us. Years ago, there was a pastor who said to his congregation, he said, what if I told you there was a substance on this planet that could provide sufficient energy that could power homes for every person on earth? What if I told you that this thing could power hospitals and schools? This could be harnessed to provide human flourishing on every level. But at the same time, this thing is highly volatile. It also has the potential to destroy every single home. It can cause irreparable harm to families and entire countries. He said to his congregation that it could supply us or it could devastate us. And then he'd ask his congregation, like, what do you think about it? Do you want to be in charge of handling this extremely powerful and volatile substance? What do you think? Anybody in the room think like, oh yeah, I'm interested? Maybe, maybe not. He went on to say that I imagine many of you would say no, just like probably many of you in this room would say absolutely not. And then he went on to say, what if I told you, those of you who said no, you have to? In other words, like you have no choice in the matter. Well, the matter of the fact is you do have control. In fact, every single one of us in the room have control over this substance. It's called money. Money can build hospitals, money can build schools, it can help children get out of poverty, it can feed people, it can provide education, it can help transform communities, it can even have the potential to transform families for generations to come. But at the same time, like it can do immeasurable good when it's moving in the right direction, but at the same time, there has been an untold amount of human suffering throughout history. especially when it's been fueled by the mismanagement of it and misguidedness of it. And we can look back in our history books and know that wars have started over this. Extreme poverty has occurred through the greed. Broken relationships have occurred, and maybe there's some of you in this room that say, yeah, I can relate to that. It's even, sadly, divided and destroyed churches. It's a resource that will either bring life or bring death. It'll either be just like my grandfather was helping me to understand the wisdom behind handling a gun. It can either be constructive or destructive. Whether you are an upper, middle, or lower tier of the wage earners in our city or in our region, we need to know, and this is just my heart to you as your pastor, we need to know, this is so important, to manage and handle this well. And like young people, or whether you're older and heading into your retirement years, please don't write this message off, because for some of us, this is going to be a great reminder. But I wish, especially as a teenager, I heard a message like this regularly. And my parents taught me some things, but man, if I lived by some of the principles I'm going to share with you in a moment, I'm telling you, it'll change the trajectory of your life and your faith in Jesus Christ. And here's the thing about wealth. Wealth is sneaky because it has this interesting way about replacing your faith in God. It can make you think that, man, if I have enough, it'll give me the peace I need, it'll give me the joy I need, I'll have less anxiety in my life. But Proverbs 18, chapter 10 says this. Look on the screen with me. It says, the name of the Lord is a what? It's a fortified tower. The righteous run to it, right? Makes sense. The Lord is this tower. He's strong, right? But the wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. In other words, when life gets hard, you are either going to choose to run to the Lord, who cares for us, or you're going to say, nah, my stuff will take care of me. My income will take care of me. But the writer is saying, no, that's all imaginary. It's fake. It's not truth. Why? Because we know this, like it all comes and goes. Money will also leave you. One day it's there, and another day it's gone, whether we're dead and buried and it's all gone anyways, or we know, and we've experienced this, we see it every day, how fleeting it can become. Some of you, and this is just an extreme example, some of you remember the Great Recession of 2008. I know some of you weren't even born. You're like, what are you even talking about? All right, I was in my late 20s, and I remember what happened. And it led to an estimated between 16 and 20, not million, not billion, but $1 trillion loss. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 20 trillion. Like I can't even, it blows my mind to even think about that amount of money. It's ridiculous. But in lost wealth in U.S. households. Sadly, it also estimated that there were 4,750 suicides attributed to that crash. So many of us learned in that season how fleeting money can become and how it really impacts the soul of a person if they attach themselves too much to it. I've heard it said that money is in some ways like water. If it has no boundaries, right, it can be very dangerous. Sadly, we saw what happened in Texas and how it killed so many people with the floods. But if you don't have any boundaries, it can be horrible, right? But at the same time, if you wall it off and dam it off and never let it flow anywhere, right? What happens to the water? Anyone ever seen water that just sits there? It does what? All you scientists in the room. It stagnates, right? It becomes toxic. It's something like you don't want to drink, you don't want to swim in. It's just gross, right? But if water flows like a river, as it flows and as it makes its way eventually to the ocean, growth happens around it. And there is flourishing that happens all around it. It's why you see a lot of cities built around rivers, because it is so valuable, right? And so in the book of Proverbs, we're called to be a river. That we're not going to spread our money everywhere that has no boundaries and no impact. And we're not going to wall it off and never share it with anyone and just hoard it, because what happens is it stagnates in our hearts. We are meant, if you catch the analogy, to be like rivers. That as we accumulate wealth, whatever that looks like for you, it flows through us in order to bless other people so that others might flourish. So we've been in this summer series called Lessons from Proverbs, where we're studying the book of Proverbs, right? All right. And we're talking a lot about wisdom because it's considered the book or the writings of wisdom. And Solomon wrote most of it, but there's other writers that contributed. And so I just want to give you a very simple definition of wisdom. This might be helpful. Wisdom is getting how life works and choosing to walk in it in a way that honors God. It's trying to figure out, like, this is how life works. And as I figure out through life experience and through gaining wisdom for other people, I'm going to choose the ways of righteousness. I'm going to choose the ways of God. And the writers, if you read with us through the book of Proverbs, by the way, it's not too late to start. If you want to start reading now, we've been trying to read through it in about a month. And if you're like, man, it's taking me longer than a month, that's okay. Just keep working on reading a chapter a day. And as you read, you're going to discover wisdom on all sorts of things, right? We talked about relationships, talked about a relationship with God, a relationship with people, we talked about work and leadership. And so today, I can't avoid this conversation around the correlation between wisdom and wealth because it's everywhere. It talks about how important this conversation is. And I know, I get it. Sometimes pastors want to avoid this. Some speak too much about it. And so there's that tension there, and I'll get to that thought in a moment. But we have to learn how to manage it in such a way that glorifies God. And not only glorifies God, but does good to those around us. And so here it is right here. And if you want to get out your phones, this might be helpful to you. I'm just going to give you 3 godly principles that I think if you can live by these principles, you're going to live in such a way that honors God with your finances. Number 1 is give faithfully. Everybody say give faithfully with me. Give faithfully. One of the dominant themes through the book of Proverbs comes down to something so simple, but yet can be so difficult and challenging. And it's this, just trusting God with my entire life. Trusting God with my entire life. And therefore, if I trust God with all things, God is saying, hey, I've woven into the fabric of creation the natural consequences of a selfish life. And so in some ways, the opposite of trust is just to say, no, I'm going to be selfish and live my own way. And God says, I don't want you to go there. Instead, this is what God says to us, Proverbs chapter 3, and we're going to be bouncing around a little bit throughout Proverbs this morning, but it says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with your what? First fruits. It's an interesting phrase. Of all your crops, then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. He says, I want you to honor me with your first fruits. In an agrarian society, that made sense because it was all about agriculture, right? And so the wealth that they had was often around the crops that they owned and all of the livestock. And so they would bring the first of their harvest and say, no, we're going to give this portion to the Lord. But if we're to give the first fruits of our harvest, there's no guarantee of the second fruits. And that's a little scary place to be in. And so really what that boiled down to is faith. That's where God's saying, I'm going to take care of you. That's where faith comes in. And so how do you know that God has your heart? When you are willing to say, no, you know what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and trust in the Lord with everything that I have. And it's been like this from the beginning. In fact, you go all the way back to the book of Genesis. Adam had a son. He had 2 sons, actually, Cain and Abel. And in the book of Hebrews, it talks about how Abel was this man of great faith. We know this because he would offer his first and his best of his flock. It was an act of faith, not fully knowing where the rest would come from, but trusting that, hey, God's going to take care of me. I'm going to give him my first and my best. And why do we give God our first and our best? I want you to think about this because this this is so important because I don't want to just preach this out to you and not know the heart behind it and the why behind it. But God gives us his first or we give God our first and our best because he did the same for us. He gave his first and his best. When God wanted to redeem and restore us because we're a sinful people, we're born as sinful people, sinful beings, he said, no, this isn't going to do. I'm going to do something about this. In fact, I planned this from the beginning that I'm going to send my son, my only son, his first and his best on our behalf. And Jesus, he hung on the cross and gave his life. He gave everything so that we could be with God and be in relationship with God. And so what I want you to see, and you can't miss this morning, is that God went first. God gave his first and his best, and then he calls us to do the same. He tells us, I don't want your leftovers. It made me think of like if I were having you over to my house, all right, and like, hey, you want to come over for dinner one night? I'd love to have you over. We'll have some great conversation. We'll hang out on the back porch. And so you walk in, and you know, I'm like, hey, what can I get you to drink? And get some drinks, and we sit down, and then my wife Joy walks out with this platter of just leftovers from 2 nights ago. Here you go. There may or may not be enough, right? How would you feel in that moment? It'd be kind of a weird moment, right? No, like when you have a guest come over to your house, like you're making the house nice, and you're giving your first and your best. You went out shopping, you did some cooking, and you want to give them a good meal. See, God's not interested in our leftovers. We give from the top first, and we don't earn God's approval. Listen, if you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, like God doesn't need your money. God's good. In fact, all of it's his anyway, right? What he wants is your heart. But it helps your heart to know that I will trust that God will take care of me. Now, here's the sad part, because people, I think, are really missing out on what God wants to do in their lives, but this is what statistics are showing right now, is that the vast majority of just the church in America, which we're pretty much the wealthiest nation in the entire world, but the vast majority of Americans that attend church and call church their home do not tithe. And I understand, like, this is a controversial, tricky subject, but still clear. But it's controversial in this day and age because some people will say, well, the tithe, isn't that 10% of my income? And isn't that an Old Testament concept? And the New Testament, Jesus often talks about the heart behind this and how we're to give cheerfully. And yes, that's all true, but I don't think that's an invitation for us to say, well, man, I'm glad that whole 10% thing is over. No, what Jesus is inviting us into is like, hey, I've come to fulfill the law, and so you're to give even more above and beyond. And so Jesus would say, no, the tithe, that's just the training wheels. That's just the starting point. And I understand pastors and churches can be weird about this conversation. Maybe you sadly have grown up in a church where this has been abused, and it's been weird, and it's been inappropriate, and it's been poorly taught, and not the scriptures have not been studied. And so on behalf of the local church in America, I just want to apologize if there's been any abuse or scandal or inappropriate or just flat out lack of truth and messages. Listen, one thing you'll hear me say often is, I don't want anything from you. I want something for you. And if you've walked that path and had bad experiences, or maybe you're wondering right now, like you're giving to another church and you're not sure because there isn't transparency and you think there's a mishandling of finance, don't give to that church. And if you have questions about our church, we'll show you the budget. Okay, we want to be as transparent as possible. But I want to go back to this thought of why do we give God our first and our best? Because he gave first and his best. But I would also challenge you not to make an excuse that you don't give generously and you don't give obediently to what God is doing through his church and around the world because you've been hurt, you're not sure, you have some past really bad experiences. Listen, Jesus, go read the Gospels. Jesus strongly reprimanded leaders in the temple that were hypocrites and used religiosity with money and abused people and took advantage of people. But in that same moment, There was a moment where Jesus, he's reprimanding the religious leaders, but he also looks over at this poor widow. And she walks up to the temple and gives a little bit by human standards, but really for her, it was all that she had, and Jesus celebrated that. Even though the religious leaders gave more, she gave all that she had. See, it's not an either-or thing. Jesus Christ has commissioned the church to be the primary vehicle by which people are saved through Jesus Christ. They are baptized through Jesus Christ. And we are made disciples of him. And we're invited into the joy of giving to the mission and the local church. I learned this early on as a teenager. Because my dad, he would write a check monthly. And I remember one day, peeking at a check. And I'll admit, when I saw the number on the check, I had two emotions in the moment. First of all, there was shock, because I'd never seen a check written that big, and I was 12 years old. But then I got kind of mad, because I'm like, what the heck is this? You're writing a check to the church. And I was thinking in my mind, I was already spending it, all the cool things I could do or we could do as a family. We could go on a killer vacation, and you're writing a check. It just didn't compute with me. But by God's grace and good mentors in my life, God helped me see that attitude was just straight up selfishness. And all those things, and here's the bigger part of all this, it's all those things that I was thinking about in my mind, and we do this too as adults, right? It all has temporary value. It's all fleeting. But when we give to the church, it's of eternal value. And Jesus talks about that. And so when Joy and I got married, we'll be celebrating soon our 26th wedding anniversary, and we committed right when we first got married. In fact, we walked through this in marriage counseling, just to premarital counseling, to make sure that we were on the same page with this, because she grew up with this teaching as well. And we committed to say, you know what, we are going to tithe 10% of our income. That was going to be the starting point for us. And I'll tell you what, it was really hard. And there were moments where we didn't feel like doing it or wanted to do it, and we haven't been perfect at it. But I remember this was a moment for me, and I've shared this story with you, so I'll just keep it brief. But this was, you know how you have mile marker moments in your faith where God shows up? You remember we just sang the song, All My Life You Have Been Faithful. And I saw some hands going like this, and people agreeing to that. Because for many of us, we can tell stories of God's faithfulness. Well, this was one of my stories. When we were moving from New York to North Carolina, we decided to step out and help my friend plant a church. But the only problem was I signed a contract on a lease, and I had no job. Because if you know anything about church plants, they can't pay people. They can barely pay the senior pastor, and I was coming in as an assistant pastor. But we just felt like God was saying, you need to go and you need to do this. And I already had a sweet job lined up in Buffalo. Pretty much offered me the job. It would have been a great situation. But I remember him specifically telling Joy and I, you need to go to North Carolina. And so we went, and no job, no income, and there was 4 mouths to feed, little ones, plus my wife and I. All my kids were under the age of 8, and yet we continued to stay faithful and tithe. My salary, I got a job as a teacher's assistant the week that we got there. My annual salary was $17,000. And I was taking care of 4 children and trying to pay rent. And we continued to tithe. And here's what's so crazy. We didn't go into any deeper debt. I don't know how we did it. Things were very tight, and we were very careful, I guess, but everyone was fed. Everyone lived. Everyone's clothed. Joel's doing quite well as a 15-year-old. I don't know if we've been able to feed him now on that income, but we had a roof over our head. But here's the thing, even though that was crazy hard, that was such a moment for us in our faith journey, because those hard times financially grew our faith. And it was if God was saying to me and to my wife, just test me. Watch this. Watch what I can do with just a little bit. And so we're meant to honor the Lord with our first fruits, and a big part of that is it's meant to do good to the people he made in his image. Proverbs 14, look at this. Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God. And the way that we honor the Lord is by being generous to those who are made in his image. It's this whole, if you've ever heard the phrase Imago Dei, think about this. Everyone that you come in contact with, whether you like them or not, get along with them or not, or you see them on the street, whatever their situation, the playing field is level in the sense that we are all children of God and we are all made in his image. And the way we honor the Lord is by being generous to those who are made in his image, who are struggling. That's why we give faithfully. We give to glorify God and to do good in this world. And that's what, if you've heard our initiative, that's what Love Where You Live is all about. That's our outreach initiative, to mobilize our church, to build relationships with others in our community, to give of our time, to give of our efforts, to give of our finances in order to help people in our city experience and know the love of Jesus Christ. That people of this city in Charlottesville and in our region should feel the effect of our presence. I wonder often, if our church didn't exist, would our city know it? And that shouldn't be our motivating factor, but it does mess with me a little bit. Our motivating factor is love and the love of God. And so we've partnered with nonprofits. We continue to do so in local schools in order to do good in our city. That's why we're building this building. It's not so we can just have a holy huddle here. I love this. This is awesome. This is great. But this isn't the end-all, be-all. We're building this building. We're investing millions of dollars in this property, not just for us, but the people who don't know Christ yet, to love on our city. And we're already starting partnerships. Like, we're already talking with people about how they can use this building. That's amazing. And it's happening around the world. Did you know because of your generosity, by the way, you are a very giving and generous church. When you look at the numbers based on attendance and giving, like, the percentage is so much higher as it relates to your generosity and your faith and your obedience. And so as a church, did you know that you were able to primarily fund a full second floor addition that includes bathrooms, classrooms, offices to help further the gospel in a place that you have never been before called Butwal, Nepal? Reminds me of the church in Antioch who helped the church in Jerusalem. They'd never met him before. And they said, no, we're going to go and help the church in Jerusalem flourish, even though we've never met this people before, because this is about the gospel. I want to show you some pictures here. So this just happened recently, where my dear friend Manahar, who's going to be here probably in another month or so, and probably have him up on stage sharing an update with us. But this is their ribbon cutting ceremony of the new facility. They just opened it up. Check this out. This is the second floor. They got some fresh paint on their church, which is amazing. There's kind of a side view of it. So it only had one floor at one point, but able to put a second floor on it. I think we've got one other picture. This is their congregation. Like, these are the people that are hearing about Jesus, that are growing in their faith. And you and I, how amazing is this, get to be a part of that. You gave $18,000 of our building fund money. Like, some would say that doesn't make sense. We need the $18,000. We're trying to raise money to finish this project. What about us? And that's not our heartbeat. It's like, we want to be a part of what God is doing. Let's give generously and give faithfully. So could we just celebrate the faithfulness of God in our lives? It's not about us. We're joining God in the mission here in the city and around the world. And I just want you to get in on it. I want you to be a part of that. And so I'm so grateful that we get to be a part of Generous Church. One person, Proverbs 11:24 says, gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. And they may not come to poverty financially, but they come to poverty in heart because they're missing out. How does this work? I don't know. I honestly don't know. All I can say is that there is something about being generous that changes what's going on the inside in here. And we all believe this. Like, whether you agree with anything I'm saying this morning, and maybe you're kind of squirming in your chair because this is an uncomfortable conversation, I get that. But there is something I think we can all agree upon. that every Christmas, when you watch a Christmas carol, nobody watches it and gets to the end and says, "No, Ebenezer, what are you doing, you stupid idiot? Like, you keep your money. You keep being that miser." No one says that. We all know that the stinginess of that little man shrunk his heart and shrunk his life. But we all know that it is in generosity that true life is found and true joy is found. So we know this. This is how we're wired. Number 2, save consistently. So we give faithfully, and then say this with me. Number 2, save consistently. Proverbs 13:11 says this, dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money, what? Little by little makes it grow. Now, I'm one of the people in the room that doesn't like that little by little phrase. I'm an impatient person. So we don't want to save much now because it feels like, we're just not putting that much money away and it's not going to really make a difference. But there's so much wisdom in this verse because what he's saying is understand that little by little, it'll grow into something bigger, right? I remember back in 2013, I injured my back and I was a mess. I battled depression for a few months. I was not a nice person to be around. And if you knew me back then, like I was probably faking it until I made it in our interactions. But it was hard. It was hard to walk. I was in constant, and like if you've ever been in chronic pain, it's unpleasant. And so I was in a ton of pain, and so I was sent off by my doctor to go to ACAC to do, I went to the rehab center. And I was told, like, hey, you just got to do these stretches and these basic exercises. Now, what was so weird about this is I was, like, the youngest person there. I was, like, 35 years old. And I just, like, there's Mabel right next to me and Opal there. And they were all, like, doing their, little stretches. And not to make fun of old people. I'm just saying, like, I felt like I was out of place in that moment. And I was so frustrated because they're having me do these exercises and these stretches. And it was like, I'm not making any progress. I still got this pain. And just the workouts felt stupid and meaningless. Why? Because I just wanted a quick fix. I wanted a fix in the moment. But the trainer reminded me with patience that, hey, Mr. Chavone, this is a slow process. It may seem small and unimpressive now, but I'm telling you, if you stay consistent, this will change over time. Listen, money is the same way. For many people, they think, you know what, I'm going to spend and then live. And whatever I have left over after spending and living, I'm going to save. And then if there's any bit left after I've saved, I'll just give the leftovers to God, just that little bit, whatever I have left. And listen, wisdom tells us all throughout the scriptures, including Proverbs, where we give first and where we give second. We give first to God. We save second, and then we live on the rest. Maybe you've heard this before. This isn't like Bible, so I'm not quoting the Bible on this. This is just, I learned this long ago. It's a good rule of thumb. Give 10% first out of your paycheck, save 10%, and then you live on the 80. Now, for some of you might be thinking, I don't even know how to do that. I was never taught that. Here's my encouragement to you. Get some wise people around you to help you. And like I did with my back pain, start small. In fact, I want to put our money where our mouth is, and I want to be able to help you with this. And so I'm going to ask everybody to get out their phones because I don't want anybody to feel embarrassed or uncomfortable about this. But throw up, if you could, Micah, that QR code. We're hoping to start some coaching, maybe even a class in a small group this fall that teaches on financial stewardship. It's probably going to be anywhere between a 7 to 10 week class, but we're only going to do it if we have interest. And I highly recommend this to you, whether you're older and thinking about retirement and how to plan for your future, or whether you're a parent and you've got kids going to college, or whether you are a student just making a little bit of money on the side, like what do I even do with this? Here's the QR code, and We've got some people in our church that are pretty smart at this, way smarter than I am, and they're willing to help out. And so When you go to that QR code, it's just a questionnaire. And it just asks like a few basic questions, and then we're going to follow up with you and just see where you're at. You don't have to commit to anything. All right, so this is not a sales pitch. All right, it's like if you give $39.95. No, we want to help you out because we love you. And at the end of the day, we're to surround ourselves with wise people that can help us do this. Doesn't matter where you're at in life, okay? We all need help from time to time. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. Finally, number 3, humility. When it comes to how we handle our wealth, we are asked to live humbly. Humility, Proverbs 22:4 says, is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. Last week we just kind of dove in a little bit deeper on what the fear of the Lord means, and you can go back and listen to that message, but we are recognizing He is the Creator. We are in awe of Him. He created us, and we know that He is for us, and we are for God, and He's saying if we trust Him and honor Him, I'm going to take care of you. Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 6. You don't have to worry about all those other things. I take care of the birds. I take care of the animals. I'm going to take care of you. But sadly, many of us are misguided by 2 things. And this is like culture in America 101. We are guided by 2 things, our anxiety and our appetites. I am scared to give anything away, so I'm going to hoard it. But when I see something I really want, I'm going to buy it. That's our culture in a nutshell when it comes to finances. I'm scared to give it away, so I'm going to hoard it, but when I see something, I really want to buy it. And so anxiety and appetite, and we're seeing this in the younger generation, by the way, like this anxiousness. And there are reasons for that we don't have time to get into, but I run into a lot of people, younger people, that are anxious about their finances. So we're ruled by our anxiety and our appetites, yet God says, I just want you to be guided by me and trust in me. I want you to use your money in a way that blesses others and helps lead other people to me. Life is so short. Life is so short. What are we going to do with what we've been blessed with? And not just our money, but our time. Proverbs 21:17 says, whoever loves pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and oil will never be rich. One of the greatest temptations for young people in the room is try to hurry up and live by the standard. And I made this mistake too. Like you just try to live by the standard that your parents are living right now. And that's a bad idea. Don't rush this because you will end up spending way beyond your means and racking up credit card debt like crazy. As followers of Jesus, we're to live differently. We are to increase our standard of giving before we increase our standard of living. I'll say that again. We are to increase our standard of giving before we increase our standard of living. Wealth is a gift of God, just like a river. It's meant to flow to us and then through us. If I could simplify it even more, all money is it's a tool. But Jesus warns us, don't love it. Jesus does not say money is the root of all evil. That is incorrect. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. Find ways to give it away. Find ways to save it for your kids so that you can impact and invest in the next generation and then just live off the rest in humility. Don't flaunt it. Don't let it control you. I don't know where you're at with all of this, but I do believe this. And many of us have heard messages like this, but I believe that everyone has a next step when it comes to following Jesus. And if you're feeling any sense of shame or guilt, or you felt like this message has been discouraging, that's not where I want this to land. In fact, I want to encourage you by sharing a story, and then we're going to sing together. So Chrisma, you can come on up. There was a man that loved money so much that his greed and his hunger and his appetite for wealth basically alienated all of his friends and the people that he knew and the people that he grew up with. At the same token, because of all the wealth that he had a lot of power. But that wealth and that power were kind of borrowed because they were given to him by the Roman Empire. He was a tax collector, meaning that as a tax collector during that time, you could pretty much take whatever you wanted off the top. So this man was considered a traitor by his own people. He was greedy. He took advantage of people who were already struggling. Imagine this, already struggling financially. He was taking off the top for his own benefit. And he was exploiting people who were just suffering greatly. And so people, as you could understand, despised this man, hated this man, didn't even want to look at this man. And so therefore, he was alone. He might have had some rich friends, but they didn't love him for who he was. They just loved him because of his wealth. And so this man, he hears about this guy Jesus, and he heard about how Jesus taught with such passion and compassion, and it made him curious. And he heard that this man Jesus was coming to his town, but at the same token, this man knew he had lots of money, and he knew he was missing something deep within his heart. There was a void that just couldn't be filled. And so out of curiosity, he went and saw this teacher, this miracle worker. But he had a problem, because as Jesus was walking into town, he couldn't see Jesus. He was short. And so he's trying to look around and couldn't find Jesus in this huge crowd. And so what he decides to do is he runs to this tree and he climbs up it, which was totally undignified for a man of his stature and a man of his wealth. But something in his heart had such a desperation to see Jesus that he was willing to climb up in the sycamore tree, which again is not something a rich person does, but he did it because he wanted to see Jesus. And Jesus sees this man in this tree, and Jesus stops dead in his tracks. And he doesn't say, you are that tax collector who has been robbing God and robbing people. Get the gasoline, get the matches, because we are burning this tree down. No, Jesus doesn't condemn him. What does he do? Zacchaeus, get out of that tree. You and me, we're having dinner tonight at your place. And Jesus looks at this man who has been isolated relationally and controlled by his greed, and he says, Zacchaeus, you and I are hanging out together. And Zacchaeus is so impacted by this undeserved grace. As they're having conversation, Jesus and Zacchaeus, it just hits him. And I don't know how quickly it was. I wasn't there in the room, but at some point, he was so captivated by the love and the grace and the generosity of Jesus and this undeserved favor. He says, Jesus, half of what I own, I'm giving to the poor. And those that I have cheated, I'm not just giving back their money, I'm giving back 4 times the amount that I cheated them. And Jesus says, salvation has come to this man's house today. But don't miss this, because Zacchaeus did not buy or purchase or earn his salvation. That's not how it works in the kingdom of God. What happened to him is what happens when God gets a hold of a human heart, is that I love to give because I love God, and he loves to change us from the inside out. And oftentimes what happens last in terms of surrendering, there's a lot of other things in our life, right, that are easy to surrender. Usually our finances and our money comes last, and God knows this, but here's the truth. You can't outgive God, because God gave his first and his best. And again, God is not after your money. What is he after, church? Help me out. Your heart. But I'm going to warn you, a little disclaimer for faith in Christianity, that when you give God your heart, everything else, it's a process, right? It's a slow process, begins to follow, including our finances. And so we're going to sing a song that are probably familiar to many, and I want this to be your prayer. And this is a hard song to sing. In fact, would you stand with me? Because the phrase we'll hear several times is, have my heart. And yes, it's okay to sing it even if God doesn't have your whole heart. That's okay. God knows your heart. And that's the most important thing. And so wherever you're at, I encourage you to sing. If you're not, it's just hard for you to sing this, let the rest of us sing this over you. But may this be a prayer focus for you this morning. And maybe it's not finances. Maybe it's something else in your life that you've not surrendered before him, that Jesus is saying, look, I want to have that because I know it's holding you back from the freedom of living for me. What would it look like to just say, God, you can have this. And so let's sing together, and then I'm going to pray, and we'll go on our way this morning. Let's sing.